From the National Newsroom of the Canadian Press, I'm Rob Westgate. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to wrap up his trip to Mexico this morning with a visit to the Canadian Pacific and Kansas City's Ferro Valley train yard. Almost 24 hours ago, Canada and Mexico signed a deal intended to deepen economic and security ties between the two nations. It also happens to come ahead of what is expected to be a challenging round of renegotiations with the United States on a trilateral trade deal. Prime Minister Mark Carney says he and President Claudia Sheinbaum have vowed to keep what they call the most important free trade agreement in the Western Hemisphere alive in the lead-up to talks next year.
We look forward to using the upcoming review of TMEC, USMCA, CUSMA, different acronyms for the same thing, to find ways to make it fairer and more effective.
When asked if Mexico and Canada were working to hold a trilateral meeting, Sheinbaum said, "We will wait for the review and then slate a meeting if possible." Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to Canada was not feeling the love during a visit to Halifax. Pete Hoekstra shared his dismay at an event hosted yesterday by the Halifax Chamber of Commerce.
I came to Canada, a Canada that it is very, very difficult to find Canadians who are passionate about the American-Canadian relationship. You ran a campaign where, it was anti-American, elbows up, Me Too. It was an anti-American campaign. That has continued. That's disappointing.
Hoekstra also dismissed the use of the term trade war when describing economic tensions between the two countries. Back on Wednesday, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne had said it was sad that the U.S. turned its back on Canada by starting a trade war. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump is applauding the decision to pull late-night host Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Reporter Morgan Norwood says he's even suggesting that the Federal Communications Commission go even further.
President Trump, returning from the UK, suggested the FCC should take licenses away from broadcasters that are repeatedly critical of him.
They give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It will be up to Brendan Carr.
A move that would be at odds with an executive order the president signed on day one in office, pledging to protect free speech.
Kimmel's removal follows remarks he made criticizing Trump and his supporters for using the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk to score political points. And finally, overseas, Pakistan's defense minister has said that his nation's nuclear program will be made available to Saudi Arabia if needed under the country's new defense pact. The two countries signing the defense deal back on Wednesday, declaring that an attack on one nation would be an attack on both. The move is being seen by some as a signal to Israel, long believed to be the Middle East's only nuclear-armed nation. This is the Canadian Press. In sports, the Toronto Blue Jays' magic number for a playoff spot remains at 3 after a 4-0 loss to the Tampa Bay Rays Thursday afternoon. Starter Chris Bassett was pulled in the 5th inning for the Blue Jays, Toronto managing just 4 hits and settling for a split of the 4-game series. Elsewhere in the MLB, the surging New York Yankees blanked the Baltimore Orioles 7-0, the victory moving the Yankees to within 3 games of first-place Toronto in the American League East. Both teams have 9 games left. The Cleveland Guardians' winning streak is up to 7 games after a 3-1 victory over Detroit. Cleveland is just 3.5 games behind the first-place Tigers in the American League Central Division. And now for some footy action. Vancouver FC hung on for an unlikely 3-2 upset aggregate win over Atletico Ottawa, setting up an all-Vancouver Canadian Championship final with the defending champion Whitecaps. And finally in the NFL, it was Buffalo beating Miami by a final score of 31-21. From the Canadian Press, I'm Rob Westgate.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. For more of today's top stories, visit thecanadianpressnews.ca.